and he's had numerous solo exhibitions, and including this year, Stimulate Surprise at Tanya Leighton Gallery in Berlin, Think Local, Act Global at MOT International in Brussels. In 2013, he had solo shows at T293, Shane Campbell Gallery in Chicago, and a solo exhibition at the National Museum of Wales called Kelp, and a solo exhibition called Gravel Master at Goss-Michael Foundation in Dallas. Dan is currently working towards a forthcoming solo exhibition at the Nomus Foundation in Rome in 2016. He's also had work showing group exhibitions at the Pompidou Centre, the Saatchi Gallery, Gamek in Bergamo, Italy, Eastside Projects in Birmingham, and Focal Point Gallery in Southend-on-Sea. His work is held in the National Museum of Wales collection, the Tang Museum in New York, and other leading private collections. At the end of the talk, there will be opportunity to ask Dan questions, and please take the opportunity to join in. So yes, I'd like to welcome Dan Rees.
Thank you. Hi, so thank you for coming. So I'm going to show a selection of works and projects that sort of span the last 10 years. As Neil said, I graduated from Camberwell in 2004, and I almost immediately moved to Berlin. So pretty much everything we'll be talking about was sort of made in Berlin when I recently moved back. So this is my first slide. This is an artwork that I exhibited in the first group exhibition that I exhibited in after graduating from Camberwell. This is an example that was exhibited a couple of years later in Sao Paulo. But first work was in a group exhibition in Paris. Postman's Decision is Final, and it's two postcards that are stuck together on the picture side. So there's two address sides visible, two identical address sides visible. They both have the stamp that says the Postman's Decisions is Final. One side is stamped, has the address of the gallery. The other side has the address of a recipient within the same city. So it's a durational piece, and throughout the course of the exhibition, I would post one of these postcards every single day from wherever I was. And so I think you can see this one has a Berlin stamp on it, so I was obviously in Berlin at the time. And if the work arrived at the gallery, then it would be part of the exhibition, and in this case it was placed on a sort of windowsill. As they arrived, they would just sort of gather and be part of the show. If they didn't arrive, then they obviously either got lost in the post or went to the other recipient on the other side of the postcard. Hence, sort of the Postman's Decision is Final. And that was sort of, I thought I'd show you this work because it was symptomatic in a way of a lot of the work I was doing at the time. I was on the painting course at Camberwell, and obviously you start off painting, but as you know, second and third year, you sort of attempt other things and get excited by other mediums. And when I moved to Berlin, I started to work for an artist called Jonathan Monk, which maybe some of you know, maybe not. But he is an artist that's maybe about 13, 14 years older than me, so in his sort of mid-40s now. But and he was quite influential in my practice because he introduced me to a lot of the conceptual artists from the 70s. So artists like Bastian Ader, Boetti, Douglas Hubler, Onkawera. I wasn't really aware of, even artists like Bruce Nauman, the kind of intricacies of their practices, I wasn't really aware of from studying. So I had this sort of strange sort of second education through another artist who was making work as if they were the first generation conceptual artists in the 70s, from what you maybe roughly term from 66 to sort of 72, artists making work in that time. An artist like Jonathan Monk was sort of second generation, so born in 69, so born in the kind of when it was all going on, but then sort of missed the 80s because it was more of a painting and sort of Richard Prince and different things going on in the 80s. But Jonathan sort of combined, in a way, the sort of appropriation of Richard Prince and certain artists going on in the 80s with the kind of hardcore conceptual approach of artists in the 70s, and it was a sort of playful thing. So that was quite influential for me. And this is Jonathan on this side, obviously. And not long after moving to Berlin, I obviously started to work with Jonathan as an assistant, and this is one of the first works, apart from the postcard series, that I made afterwards. And it was a game of table tennis that was videoed between Jonathan and I. So the idea was the sort of the reason I considered this work was the idea of a kind of conversation or a kind of collaboration over time, and kind of the idea of an artist of a different generation and having this sort of back and forth between the two. So in a way, Jonathan was having this kind of collaborative back and forth with artists of a different generation. And as a young artist, I was maybe 22, 23 at the time, I was sort of asking myself, well, how can I fit into conceptual art? How could this idea of a canon, what's my position? What does it mean ought to be an artist? And I suppose a lot of things, especially specifically a conceptual artist, and the idea of a kind of the back and forth, the kind of metaphor somehow table tennis seemed to fit, and so Jonathan obviously accepted without having too much pressure, and it was at a time it was designed as an ongoing series, and the second artist I invited to play was Simon Starling, and then after that I actually didn't get around, it sort of faded away and other things took over, but I was intended to play a short clip of the Simon Starling video, if that opens. So that was just the last few points of that game. What is that? I think I was the one on the left-hand side, so we would look probably quite similar in the end. But Simon also is another artist who, if you don't know his work, works in a dialogue with artists that have gone before him. With this, Jonathan Moore, artist in the 70s, and the kind of conceptual thing. Simon Moore, the kind of modernism and design. But it was about the idea of sort of understanding how to fit in and how to relate, and a kind of a notion of some sort of form of collaboration, which sort of leads to this, another work which was sort of from that time, which was more around maybe 2007, so maybe just a couple of years after I graduated, and this was a work called One Afternoon and Evening in Llanelli, an ode to Cardiff Wyn Evans. So this is images from the town of Llanelli in South Wales, and it's this town that Cardiff Wyn Evans was born in. And so I should maybe kind of qualify that by saying that I'm from Swansea, which is sort of a town sort of next to Llanelli, similar, but if anything has slightly more going for it. And it was the sort of intrigue of this work was sort of knowing a bit about Cardiff as an artist, and sort of wondering, well, how does a town like Llanelli influence you as a young person with a desire to be an artist? How you treated it, all those things. It's obviously, I mean, unless you don't know, but it's a town in South Wales that, like many towns in Britain, it's a post-industrial town, suffered huge declines in the 80s over the course of a century, and now suffers sort of very bad social problems, all the things that you normally expect. It's of no design, that there's no people in the photos, that's just how it panned out. I drove around in a car with my mother drove me there, we went around and I took 40 photographs of the just various locations randomly, and I then subsequently wrote to Cardiff after obtaining his email address from someone, I can't remember how, and sent him the images, small images that I had taken of his hometown, and told him I was going to have an exhibition in London, and if he could choose the images in which I would exhibit. So this is his selection. So again, it was a sort of a kind of idea about some sort of silent collaboration in a way, and I suppose a little bit about what art can. I suppose that the thinking of how the relationship of an artist and a place and their upbringing, and how these towns that are kind of what might be considered cultural backwaters, how they actually play a role in an artist's development. And obviously, maybe you might recognise this and recognise the title as a reference to Bastien Arda's work. I can't remember the full title now, but it was an evening in LA. He went around and took a series of black and white photographs, listening to some music and what inspired him at the time, and he took photographs. So it was very much within that kind of type of working, the kind of conceptual second or third generation thinking about how to make work. This is a series of paintings which I suppose, I think these were around 2009. These were the sort of first, the first kind of project that I made that was using painting again, and it was, I suppose the kind of there was a point where I kind of got a little bit not fed up, but I was a little bit limited by the idea of making conceptual artwork that looked too much like conceptual artwork. So I was trying to find ways in which to sort of broaden out of that, and painting was a sort of appeared at the kind of obvious end of the spectrum to conceptual artists of the 70s, and maybe not so now. I don't think is really the case anymore, but even at the time, even sort of 5 to 10 years ago, it did. There was you'd hear about stories about conceptual artists that backdated their painting work. People like Joseph Kassouf or Baldassare or whoever, they were painters, and then they discovered conceptual art, and there was a sort of race for who gave up painting first and embraced conceptual art, because painting was maybe market orientated and something that they didn't feel was challenging enough, was political enough, was essentially relevant to the time. And I think that kind of thing sort of stayed with me a bit, and I was kind of the opposite. I was getting a bit fed up with certain aesthetic, and so I was with this project. It's a very simple project, but I was trying to marry the two things together. So this is a Philip Guston painting that I copied onto a cover of the Beatles' White Album. So that the Beatles' White Album was designed by Richard Hamilton in 1968, and his desire apparently was to for it to be kind of an example of minimalist art entering the popular mainstream, which hadn't really happened up until that point. It was minimalist art was kind of niche avant-garde thing, solo wit. Those types of artists were doing their thing, but it was in museums. It wasn't being embraced by popular culture. So it was very considered design by Richard Hamilton, and it was to merge those two things together. And I suppose by painting these paintings on top, this is a Picasso. This is a what's his name now? I'll remember that. But by painting these artists' work on the top of the White Album, it was I guess a part of my process of trying to kind of solve this kind of problem of there being a kind of dichotomy between the conceptual and painting, whereas I didn't necessarily see that there was those two things were mutually exclusive. So you could be a conceptual artist and do painting, and painting artists that do painting were of course should be considered conceptual artists. So that then leads on to another painting project, which again is very sort of conceptually orientated. So with these works, they're sort of they're kind of like the paint is squeezed out of the tube directly onto the canvas. It's sort of spread around a bit and then pressed against the wall to make this imprint. So within the process of making it, or by looking at it, you can understand the process of making it. You can see that it was very difficult to control. It was within the the idea dictated the form in a way, and the form dictates kind of what you see. This was a whole exhibition of these works, and they referenced, I guess, abstract painting, which is maybe a kind of spiritual experience, or I don't know, it's a sort of maybe at the other end of what you might consider to be conceptual artwork, which is maybe understood as sort of dry and logical and cerebral, and yet it was through a kind of arbitrary process of pressing against the wall and doing this very simple thing, which then found its form. So it kind of merged those two things and kind of contradicted what you might expect of an abstract painting work. That's another example. This was an exhibition in T2 in Rome in 2009. So the last painting work that I'll, well, not the last, but this is the last one I'll sort of this moment is these plasticine work. So these are children's plasticine or Play-Doh sort of mixed together to make it kind of muddy and pressed onto wood and sort of exhibited as paintings. And this was the first version that I ever made, and it's maybe 60 by 60 centimeters. And again, the idea was sort of mixing this high and low of what is sort of generally understood as abstract painting, which sort of has occupied this sort of quite a precious place in art history, and then sort of plasticine, which is maybe one of the first forms that a child encounters as they're sort of grappling with colours and form. And what's sort of evident with these works is that from a distance they really looked like thick oil paintings from a certain time, and when you got close you could see that there were plasticine and fingerprints, and this is a much bigger version. This is maybe 2 meters by 2 meters, or each panel is 2 meters by 1 meter. So this was a couple of years later, but again another version of plasticine on the boards, and it sort of mimicking or talking about abstract painting. So I'm just going to sort of jump ahead a little bit, just sort of bypass a few things to the Wales Nicaraguan Solidarity campaign, which is maybe doesn't quite link up yet, but I think when I sort of explain it and finish it, I think it will sort of all tie together. But this is a project which is sort of my interest started in this maybe around 2012, and sort of it's an ongoing project. This was the poster which caught my attention in the museum in Merthyr Tydfil, which is a small town in South Wales. As you can see, Paul Robeson Jr. was talking. Paul Robeson Sr., maybe you know who Paul Robeson Sr. was, but he was a black activist singer in the 30s in America. He was essentially labelled a communist and kind of blacklisted by during the McCarthy era, and treated horribly by the Americans. And because of that, he sort of found solace in other places and visited Wales and sung with the choirs in the South Wales valleys, because he identified with their radical politics at the time. This is a meeting that happened in 1986. It's the inaugural meeting of the Solidarity campaign with Nicaragua, and 1986, just to give a bit of context, was the height of, it was actually the end of the miners' strike. So Arthur Scargill, I'm sure you've heard of Arthur Scargill, Jeremy Bell made the work, Battle of Orgreave. That was a kind of a reenactment of one of the skirmishes that took place in Yorkshire during the miners' strike. But 1986, this was the lowest ebb of Britain's industrial decline. It was Thatcher had certainly won. The unions had been defeated, and in many senses all hope had been lost. And it was a very dark time for lots of people whose lives were bound up with the kind of working class people who were involved in coal mining or industrial labour. And what I found intriguing about this was that it was during the kind of low point that they decided, obviously certain groups decided to form a solidarity campaign with the country on the other side of the world. So these are just some images of Merthyr Tydfil. So just to give you a little brief backstory, in the 19th century, Merthyr Tydfil was one of the most prosperous towns in Britain. As kind of divided as it is now, nobody would ever consider this, but it was producing 40% of Britain's coal. It was essentially a large cog in maintaining Britain's empire. And it was, as a result, it was cosmopolitan. People from all over Europe would come to work in the coal mines, not a coal mine like this. Is an open cast coal mine which is currently working, but it kind of shows you the landscape of the place. And as a result of all these people that were working in Merthyr, it developed a kind of tradition of radical left-wing thought, which still exists today, but not as strongly. But throughout the history of the Labour Party, Merthyr Tydfil has always been a very important seat for them, and the South Wales Valleys has always been a kind of hotbed of Labour political activity. Nyren Bevan, you go back to Chartism. So it's these radical things spurned from this place. And one of the main events was the uprising in 1831. So this was an event that had political importance over on a European scale. So, and it's almost completely forgotten from British history because, for whatever reasons, but we don't follow industrial strikes like this. But this was the first example of the use of the red flag as an example of the labour as a working class struggle, and it is almost not celebrated at all. But in 1831, the people of Merthyr Tydfil decided to strike against their poor conditions, and there were 7 days of riots. People got killed, and it was a big thing at the time. And during the protests, someone dipped a bed sheet in pig's blood and waved it as their banner, and hence the red flag was sort of born as a symbol of working class struggle throughout the world. And this is a poster. This is one of the sort of fundraising events from the Wales Nicaragua campaign. This is a cinema night for Rosa Luxemburg, just to give you an idea of how they sort of formed their solidarity, what they did. They organised events, charity things, cinema nights, music nights, many different things to raise probably what were very modest amounts of money, but people were dedicating their lives to a country on the other side of the world that they'll never visit, that they'll never benefit from at all, but maybe as a way of coming to terms with and helping them in their sort of their own political despair on their own, in their own country, that there was a place maybe on the other side of the world that was suffering a worse fate. Again, that's Paul Robeson, this is another film, Cinema Night. Of the posters from their campaign. Just briefly, that without talking about solidarity campaigns, the Spanish Civil War needs kind of a quick mention, because in the 30s, a lot of working miners and people involved in industrial work in Britain went to fight against Franco's fascists during the Spanish Civil War. So Neath is a relatively, nobody would ever visit Neath unless you had some particular reason to go there in South Wales, but there's a book been published about Neath and their role in the Spanish Civil War, which intrigued me. And it's symbolic of the role that the working class people played in essentially defining 20th century history that is maybe largely unknown, and is a very extremely important role. These were essentially illegal volunteers. People went illegally, and now they'd be labelled extremists, but people risked arrest to even get to Spain. They went against the will of the British government. They sort of boarded boats and things like this, and went to Spain to fight a war. A lot of the time they didn't tell their families and friends, and that showed the commitment, the anti-fascist commitment amongst miners and working people in certain areas of Britain. And maybe people have, I don't know if anyone's seen the film Pride, but it's another example of solidarity across a kind of border, or a kind of a gap, if you were. So this is a story of the kind of London lesbian and gay organisation, transgender bisexual organisation in London in the 80s that supported the Welsh miners, and it becomes a powerful example, because what it displays is that solidarity between groups can be constructed, so it doesn't have to be miners from one country having solidarity with miners from another country. It can be two completely separate groups that you might not consider have anything in common, but they can come together because they have a goal, which is whatever that might be. But there's I think a kind of powerful political message in these examples of solidarities that cross over certain sections of society or certain ideas of society. And I'll come back to all those things. I was going to play a short clip of a video which kind of sums up a lot of those ideas, but I'll just introduce a show that I made in Brussels recently at MOT Gallery. This is an image of an Artex ceiling. This is my grandmother's Artex ceiling, and the patterns are kind of burned into my mind as a youngster. This is the living room, but all through the flat, the ceilings were Artex, and as you'd fall asleep, it was something that you'd follow with your eyes, and you'd try and find the kind of end, and it was sort of imprinted on you in a way. And in many ways, Artex is a maligned thing. I sort of took it as a symbolic of in a way, the kind of the plight of the working classes. It was removed whole scale during the 80s as a sort of push for gentrification, or I don't know what you'd call it, but it's a material that is quite labour intensive. It requires laborious skill. It requires people that it's a technical skill, and it's, for certain reasons, it's fallen out of fashion. It was very popular in 70s, 60s, 70s, and I think mid 80s, 90s. It's, if you were to Google search Artex now, you'll find more web pages that will tell you how to remove it rather than install it. And it's a signifier of a social demographic. And so what I've done, what you can see here is what's essentially kind of abstract painting, but I've used the same tool, the same comb that the Artex people would use, people who made Artex students, and made a painting using oil paint and obviously bright colours and different colours and different kind of shapes and stuff, and made the kind of Artex pattern into a painting, which I think the sort of, again, it's sort of the kind of idea of high and low, and the abstract painting being a kind of sort of height of elitism in a way within the arts, because there is nothing you can understand with an abstract painting. It's something that you have to sort of be in the art world to understand, and the difference between how that is valued compared to how labour is valued in our country, or in any sort of society, in Western society. So the idea of these works was to disguise them in a sense. So to make these paintings that were deliberately attractive in order that people might potentially buy them, rich people, wealthy people, and they have, and it means that the paintings then now exist in wealthy people's homes. So Artex, form is, through these works, is kind of re-entering extremely wealthy people's houses while it's being removed from others. So that was sort of the idea of this project. These are just other examples. And this is the slide presentation which I wanted to show you. So this was in the exhibition at the same time. This is actually, I think it just finished. I think this exhibition maybe came down a couple of days ago. It was in Brussels. So I would just play this now. How does this play? Okay. So I'll just say before I play this, this is 13 minutes long and requires a degree of concentration. It's quite a lot of words. I hope it's okay. And then after that, I've just got one more thing and kind of wrap it up. So bear with me. So I hope that wasn't too sort of hard of to follow, but that was, I should say, that was made with the help of an advertising agency in New York who I worked with quite a while. We wrote those pages together, and obviously the kind of corporate style came from them. That's almost impossible to do without being unironic about it. But it wasn't meant ironically. It was, I suppose, questioning the idea whether and essentially a positive message or a good message can ever really be conveyed or come across in a with that method, or it was always corrupted. Will it always be, how I suppose that thinking about how culture is influenced, how things are kind of spread, ideas are spread, what is relevant today, what's considered relevant, comes from media in many different aspects of life, but can you sort of forcibly put a kind of good message across, or is that always kind of contaminated by the method, using the kind of advertising, the kind of sloganeering, and the kind of slightly cringy sort of terminology that we used. So I'm aware of the time. I mean, it's 7:10, so maybe this is a good point to. I'm not at the end, but maybe this is a good point to keep going. I don't know if people have. Yeah. Okay. So well, I've just got one last project to talk about, and it's the Seaweed project, and it's the work downstairs. So I'll try and sort of go over this fairly quickly, but this is people during the Irish potato famine. I think in the 1850s, I think it was, and they're gathering seaweed off the rocks in Ireland to supplement their diet to eat. And my interest in seaweed came about. That's Pringles. Came about because in Wales it's a traditional food. So in Ireland, in many ways, it's a traditional food. In Britain, it is essentially part of our historical culture, although not many people know it. But it's in Wales, it's called lava bread. In Ireland, it's called something else. What we eat in Britain is a species of seaweed called Porphyra in Latin and nori in most of the world. So it's in Asia and Japan, it's $1 billion industry. In Britain, it's an extremely niche, protected market. Very few people buy it. There's very little even kind of desire to even kind of expand the industry. But I sort of thought about this a bit more because I was buying tins of. I'm just going to skip past this Pringle to this. This is the lava bread that you can buy in tins that's sold in the Tesco's in Swansea. So I would buy this and buy this sort of in bulk in a way and take it back to Berlin and just eat it whenever I wanted it. But I just had a sort of realization as I was sort of doing it with some friends one day that the very same people that would maybe fork out quite a lot of money for sushi maybe would find this disgusting. And it's exactly the same product, exactly the same thing. It's treated a bit differently. This is not dried out. This is kind of gelatinous sort of paste or something. But it's essentially the same thing. But there's a kind of weirdness to this thing and a kind of safe, interesting, essentially kind of a kind of expensive commodity in sushi that you maybe pay quite a lot over the odds for. You sort of buy into an idea that you don't to this. So I was invited to do an exhibition in the National Museum of Wales in Cardiff in 2013, so I thought that would maybe be a good topic. So initially my idea was to just work with a graphic designer and redesign this package like for like, but just bring it up to date slightly. It was sort of a project that isn't really it's a bit of a thankless task because it's extremely hard to do, to actually do something that's not just whimsical, it's not just sort of, oh, maybe it can work in an art exhibition, but if it would actually work in a supermarket in order to boost sales. So this is what we came up with, and obviously I like sort of explaining things. There's a bit of a thing on the back, it's sort of explaining the vitamin content of seaweed and stuff like this. But it was sort of, the key thing we wanted to get clear was you could actually visualize the plant, so there was no longer this sort of mystery of like, you know, seaweeds. It surrounds the entire globe. It's a plant that is in the water around every non-landlocked country, and it is fundamental to kind of all the plant species life on the planet. Every plant species life evolved from seaweed, and it is extremely important to life on the planet, and it also is something that in future maybe will be even more important because it doesn't require fresh water to grow and it doesn't require land, which are two things that are going to be more and more scarce in the future. So my sort of kind of thing was that in Wales we're sitting on a bit of a gold mine here, and if only we would market it correctly, then we could compete with the Asian billion-dollar industry. I still think we can. I still believe, of course we can, but in doing this, it was a serious attempt. I don't necessarily think this is maybe the best redesign we could have done. I think people could have done a better one, but my ambition for the exhibition was that the Parsons who do this brand, all their details are still on there, so all their kind of like addresses and phone numbers are on there. And I thought that maybe they would see this press and they would get kind of some sort of legal kind of annoyance going on. But in the end, they might just think, okay, well, actually, this is a good idea, and they would maybe steal my idea and do it themselves, which they didn't as yet. This is this is the sort of installation perspective. So we had the sort of random boxes sort of displayed on these sort of exhibition plinths, which mimic the architecture of the ceiling, which is sort of weird, sort of futuristic kind of, I forgot what you call that shape now, but kind of pyramid step shape. In the background, well, here are the boxes. They were kind of scattered like seaweed might kind of be scattered on the rocks. We made 500 or 1,000 boxes on here. This is a Yves Saint Laurent vintage suit from the 70s that I bought and put a seaweed kind of logo emblem on. The reason being that Yves Saint Laurent also designed caviar tins. So I was thinking, well, how do brands make their products acceptable, fashionable, expensive, and it's some respects through association in advertising. So through the association Yves Saint Laurent partially helped our notion that caviar is a luxury, expensive item. So that's the design. Also in the exhibition were these photographs. The National Museum of Wales it's a contemporary art gallery, has historical art, and it's also a natural history museum. So they actually, oddly enough, had about 500 sort of examples that they had stored away that nobody ever got out of seaweed prints that were some dated back for 200 years, that they had people go and just take these sort of seaweed samples. So these are actual seaweed prints that have been photographed by the museum. So part of the project was to these are single cell slices of seaweed that have been laid out on sort of blotting paper, much maybe how you sort of crush flowers or something, but you preserve it. And some of them have dates on, some of them are more recent, but some of them are very old. And we photographed them in this manner that we kept the Kodak color cards on in the background. And the idea was to sort of highlight the graphic quality of the prints, because to me they looked kind of computer generated. They had a sort of futuristic thing, they were kind of interesting prints, and I liked the fact that they sort of reminded me of a bit of Christopher Williams, the photographer, a bit of a kind of New Order album cover. They had this sort of interesting graphic design quality to them, which I thought might help readdress in our minds what you might think of seaweed as being sort of green, slimy goo on the beach, but actually quite beautiful plants. In relation to that, we also sort of did these kind of Popeye I was working with another artist who helped me on these sort of, kind of Popeye style things that, sort of, propaganda essentially for maybe trying to promote it to children. So you've got a kind of fish swimming, instead of saying help, he says kelp, and he eats some seaweed and he grows into a bigger fish and he scares away the shark. It's sort of thing, or you've got some lobsters in a tank about to be boiled by a chef, and they shout kelp and they organise this kind of great escape style thing, they escape out of the tank with the help of the kelp. Or in this instance, some posh people are having a dinner and they run out of caviar, and the butler's like, we've got no caviar left, so he goes and gets some seaweed, and it actually tastes a lot nicer than the caviar. So that was sort of, the kind of like this sort of generated propaganda around the thing. At the same time, we took out, the day of the exhibition, we took out an ad in the national newspaper of Wales. You'd never know, the Western Mail. And a friend of mine posted a photo, and we just took that out, no explanation at all, but just said Welsh Norwegian guy eating some lava bread on toast. So we hung that in the exhibition. And the other element was these huge billboards, which I imported over from China, and the idea was to sort of speak about the importance of the image within society, how that conveys a message, the idea of things getting across sort of time, and how things enter culture and how things become important. And this is, I'm sort of winding up now, this is the second part of the exhibition, which took place in Tanya Leighton Gallery in Berlin. So it's sort of the same themes. These are some Vietnamese seaweed farmers. Vietnam is a country in Asia that has a very small seaweed production, and therefore it's sort of an interesting case study to see, well, how could a country who doesn't produce seaweed start to farm? In Britain, we don't farm any seaweed at all. All the seaweed that is produced in Britain is hand-gathered off the rocks, or sort of swept up in these kind of weird machines that kind of like cut it off and sort of scoop it up. But there's no actual farming of seaweed. And in order to do that, you need expertise and you need a market. Obviously, you need to sort of have to generate that. And in Vietnam, they're sort of exploring, competing, to begin, even slightly competing with China and Japan and the Philippines. This is another installation shot. This is a very big, 4 meters by 3 meters billboard, tri-vision billboard. You might recognize these from the 90s. You can sort of see it rippling, the ripple effect, the videos in the background. This is some boxes of seaweed that I imported from Vietnam that had never been imported to Asia, to Europe before. This particular type of seaweed that isn't available in Europe. And the other aspects of the show, Tanya's got 2 spaces just across the road, was this slide presentation. And it was a bit like the slide presentation I just showed you. I'm not going to play it, but it was similar corporate language. Actually, this one I fully employed the same New York ad agency. This was the first thing they did for me. They did this. I gave them the brief established Welsh lava bed is the next must-have luxury item among aspiring affluents. And this is what they produced. This is the kind of slide presentation which they produced. And they kind of rebranded everything. They redesigned the tin, everything you could imagine. And it was subsequently after this that I worked on the solidarity thing. But in that instance, I was much more involved because they didn't really understand the project as much. So, for instance, these are just a couple of the slides. The target doesn't want to be told what luxury means, they want to define it. They're collectors of experiences, endless tales of rich or forbidden path experiences, the true stamps of discernment. And barrow for, so the taste of rugged fun. So the barrow for is the Welsh language version of lava bread. So they thought that would be more authentic, it would appeal to people in the same way that maybe Scottish whiskey and the kind of advertising branding that goes around that. That is it, and I just actually, if we do have time, I just wanted to play one last thing. It's just 2 minutes long. Is that fine?
Yeah.
2 minutes long, and it doesn't follow the chronological order, but it's a short, yes, 2 minute animation that was made in collaboration with friends, and it's somehow reflective of a kind of political outlook in Britain at a certain point in time. I'm thinking Tony Blair's "We're all middle class now" plays a big part in this, and I think somehow what's going on now with Corbyn and things, it's kind of an interesting thing to kind of rethink about how it all plays out. So just play that and then we're done. Maybe not. There we go.
let the paintings that you sold, was it Artex or texture? Did you let the people know that you were selling it for that reason? Or
no, but I did. No, because a lot of people, even if I had explained it to them, wouldn't have understood that.
okay.
Because Artex to Americans doesn't necessarily mean much, So it's. But what I have subsequently done, I didn't show you images now because it was too much, but I have then subsequently, after 3 or 4 years of them owning the works, have written to them to ask them if I could photograph the work in their apartment or wherever it is, so installed in their home. So I have these images, these documentations of the work hanging in their apartments.
So do you not feel as if you're taking the piss out of them? A little bit?
No. I think they've got a very nice work. I think they wouldn't have never bought it unless they have liked it, and that's the main thing. I think again, it's you could easily. I think one could easily turn that onto who's making fun of who or who's taking the piss of who. It could easily be reflected back onto the artist because you're making something that's acceptable to the market as well, So who's actually sort of complicit in that? I'm complicit in that they bought it and I'm entering into that market thing. But I think that maybe would be a little bit too harsh to say that, but it's certainly a conceptual project, and if they didn't maybe understand it, then it might seem potentially like that. But we've done every effort to explain that it was a sort of it was a conceptual work. The thing is that certain painting things can have a kind of an extremely kind of the attraction can be so strong for people that they don't even hear what you're saying, so they'll just go and buy something without, regardless of, they won't even be interested in what you're trying to say. But almost everyone we wrote to allowed us to then re-photograph the work. So everyone was kind of up for then engaging in a second stage, even if it was years later and we had never told them. So.
You separate painting project and conceptual art, and I want to use the conceptual art, the word of conceptual art, but you separate like painting works and some works which you want to say about something connected with society or problem of society, for instance, like being
Yeah.
So you separate it, or you do?
So I try not to. So I think that the reason I sort of showed the things in that order in a way was to try and hopefully not, so it didn't seem too much like that. But the exhibition that had that slide presentation about Nicaragua also contained 6 paintings as well. So I was trying to combine the works at the same time in the exhibition, so they had to kind of be read together and understood. So you sort of think, well, how does an abstract painting maybe relate to this extremely direct kind of almost propaganda video that's, But in my eyes, I suppose I wouldn't make a distinction because my interest in painting would be conceptual, and I think that there's a kind of fetish and a huge thing around painting, the history of painting that you have to kind of be respectful, whatever, engage in and stuff. But I think that, of course, I didn't really paint for a couple of years after graduating, and it was when I learned about artists like Kippenberger, Michael Kreber, Vernon Carpenter, plenty of people who were working conceptually with painting, extremely conceptual painting, And in a way, that in the 80s, that kind of time, they were reacting against what had gone before them, which is sort of the dismissal of painting. But yeah, I wouldn't. I would like. It's the opposite actually. I would hope that to try and bring those things as close together as possible, so there's no separation. Yeah.
So I have another question for the choice about the Beatles album covers.
Yeah.
Which the process of choosing those artists that you would kind of copy or I mean, how were they like high, were they like all big artists, or were they like smaller ones, or how's the process of choosing?
Yeah, it was a bit. So it was a bit pop in a way. So it was. I mean, it was sort of bound to what I felt I could reproduce myself without, being a particularly good painter. So I had to like repaint them. So I couldn't choose a kind of something that had too much blending in it, or like it had to be kind of like a little bit. So it was kind of limited by that. And then I did kind of art. I mean, one of the works was a painting by a gorilla. So a monkey that did painting, and it was celebrated as a gorilla artist. So they weren't all like well-known artists, but it was sort of, I guess it was about. I suppose it wouldn't have worked if I'd chosen. I mean, I didn't even consider sort of choosing my friends or my, contemporaries. It was sort of about. It was about things being popular in a way. Yeah.
It's a practical question. How do you do something like getting all of those billboards?
China. Just China. Everything comes from China. Yeah. They don't make them in Britain anymore. So you can get everything from China. It's quite cheap as well. I mean, you honestly, you just we didn't have to do too much research to find this.
I'm trying to form a question in my head. It's taken me a little while. I'm just intrigued with this idea of a couple of things, like institutional critique, Duchamp and the ready-made and so forth. But it's this idea of that without the context of the gallery, how aware are you that the work only functions within the context of the gallery? As in, like, the advertising campaign, I get asked myself, were they the correct context for the work? I get thinking, if that film was to be shown on a platform, is the thing of like, thinking was that weird thing of, kind of like don't take this one, but like a body snatcher, just inhabiting things.
Mm.
So you inhabit a campaign, you lock onto this project, inhabiting, painting, and really inhabiting it not as an interest in painting, but thinking of painting as an ornament.
Mm.
And a lot of the work is about this kind of about perception and a shift of value from taking something, like I said, low to high, seaweed, and turning it into sushi, or taking Artex and rebranding or reselling it to. So I kept thinking, like, why do you need colour? Why do you need colour? Why don't you just give the Artex and make it quite minimal? But it's that thing of like, no, I need to make it like a painting, like a painting, people understand that. And I kept thinking the idea of like that these things can only function in the gallery. So I think on that thing, just thinking, but the films were so different, and I kept thinking, would that, because what I really enjoyed and didn't realise is how political and I'm quite intrigued about how you didn't show a lot of other work and how you could be perceived as being a very different artist, through your paintings or things that sell. And I can imagine there must be a rupture where you are constantly trying to, there's this gallery pressure of like, these ornaments, they sell, and you're making lots of money, and then there's this thing of like, I like this project about, Nicaragua, and I can see it's this odd discrepancy, and I think that I don't know, I'm just babbling now. I'm just intrigued by the idea of the audience reception. When they come to the gallery like this, I'm intrigued about how aware you are of the audience and how they perceive the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's. I mean, I think it's good, and I think that it's true. I think that there's certainly certain aspects of the work that, like I say, certain, you know, the kind of conceptual aspect, the kind of political thing is completely ignored, and there's not much you can do about that as an artist, because very quickly it gets circulated on media and it's just completely out of your control. As to the sort of
well, I'm intrigued by the idea. That's what I was thinking of context. I was thinking that it was at the right forum, as in like maybe you needed to just go around the country, just showcasing these films, doing nights like this.
Yeah,
become a kind of politician for it.
Yeah,
you know, like promoting Lava Red. You need, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a bit like it's like you go the full way and you actually adopt the full strategy.
Yeah. I mean, I like that idea. I think that there's also the element that I don't know. I sort of think this sort of Trojan horse thing. So because I don't really feel like I think I still feel that in a way I'm operating outside. I don't feel like I'm sort of in the inner circle. So when I do exhibitions I know that the art world will view it in a way. I feel like by bringing things from more of a kind of popular culture or working class culture, then it's sort of infiltrating it that way. Because the reverse is sort of very predominant. You know, the kind of reverse flow of culture from the kind of high-end tastemakers to the general public is a consistent flow of information. You know. And that's how people are sort of kind of controlled in a way, you could argue. And it's when, I mean, things conversations around kind of cultural hegemony. How will we get to a point when socialist moment might be possible? The kind of ideas of change, ideas of like the fact that the majority of people maybe disagree with policies or politics or things. You know, how do those people's ideas actually communicate upwards in that direction from bottom up? You know, and it's rather than sort of top down, bottom up. And I suppose that in a way, I sort of see my role as an artist to infiltrate the art world more than I do in a way to communicate with. I really enjoy communicating with the public. That's a really exciting prospect as well. But I suppose that I see my role as also infiltrating the art world as a way of changing it a little bit from within. You know, because without.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, I really am far more excited by. And that's why I think it's hard to actually form a question, because it's far more philosophical debate that's being set up, and it's far more challenging. It's not something you can pigeonhole, whereas you can, it sounds awful in some ways, but the other strategies you've adopted, like the art, you can just pigeonhole and go, I can see that strategy and I can see what you're trying to do. But then when you're introduced with this other project, which seems to have quite substantial legs, you know what I mean? You go, God, this is quite a major thing you could take on, even a Lava Red thing. And that's quite a big feat, and it feels like, but you can already see how the commercial constraints of the gallery or we kind of go, oh, that's a lot to deal with, and don't want to deal with this. Whereas the public institution is far more not relaxed, but there's a critical armature in which they can talk about bigger ideas.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I think that the public institution, you know, the National Museum in Wales gave me that opportunity, and that was the kind of feeling. I think that you do work differently when it's a public institution than when it's a private gallery. So I would only embrace the challenges getting more complicated when it becomes a public institution. It's just those invitations you have to wait for. So.
True. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you.